segue here is into just opening the discussion on fertility boosting foods. And
Mhm.
I would imagine that if these foods are fertility boosting, then they're in all likelihood like the optimal human diet because it is going to in order for a woman to become pregnant and to carry a baby through term and for that baby to be healthy. Imagine what is required from nature in order to do that. And that kind of gives us, I would imagine, some window into how to optimize the human condition through nutrition. So let's start talking about that. Are there such things as fertility boosting foods?
Yes and no, right? My opinion is that I'm in full agreement with you on foods for optimal human function being foods that also optimize fertility. Because when we look at what's required for a human being to survive, fertility is one of those optional functions of the body. Like, you can survive for a very long time and be like completely infertile, right? And if nutrition is not optimal, one of the first places your body is going to metabolically pull back from is on fertility. You see it at a slower rate with men. With women, it's very obvious because we have this feedback from our monthly cycles relaying information to us, time and time again, whereas a man might not necessarily know unless they're doing like a semen analysis on a regular basis. But you see ovulation slow or even stop when a caloric deficit of only like 25% of calories is put into place. And that happens within a period of just a couple of months. In addition, there's a number of micronutrients that are absolutely vital to ovarian function, to ovulation, to maintaining building up a healthy endometrium each cycle, which of course is shed during the monthly period. And so when I'm looking at, what is optimal for fertility, you're really looking at what is optimal for general human health and metabolism, because our fertility, our hormone balance is just a reflection of that. So are these special foods that are like not helpful for you outside of the context of fertility? No. But I can highlight in specific ways why they're beneficial to fertility. So one of the first things that I consider is not just the micronutrient balance, but also the macronutrient levels. Your fat, carbohydrate, and protein goes against the conventional wisdom on fertility, but really protein at its core is one of our most important macronutrients for maintaining human health, but also the health of the menstrual cycle, healthy sperm production. And our protein-rich foods are also, by default, often our highest, most nutrient-dense, micronutrient-rich foods. Of course, in my dietetics training, it was all fruits and vegetables, over and over. Those are our most nutritious foods. And I've actually got nothing against fruits and vegetables. I think they're also part of a healthy diet. But if we're really looking at the key micronutrients required for optimal fertility, this points you in the direction of primarily protein-rich foods with some specific other like micronutrient-rich foods on the side. So you're looking at red meat and animal foods, all foods of animal origin, particularly meat on the bone or slow-cooked meat that are richer in collagen. There's a number of reasons that the amino acids within there are vital for fertility, also absolutely vital during pregnancy as you're growing this, brand new human being. Eating those animal foods nose to tail, so also including the organ meats. Organ meats are just particularly micronutrient dense. I mean, they have like 200 times more vitamin B12 per ounce than an equivalent portion of muscle meat. They're also just uniquely concentrated in some nutrients that might not be in large concentrations in the muscle meat or might not really be in there at all. So definitely some organ meats in there. Fatty fish and seafood, a lot of the micronutrients in there like iodine, DHA, they can be a little bit tricky to get in the diet in sufficient quantities if seafood is missing. It can be done, but it takes a lot of extra legwork to get there. And when you start to analyze some of the writing of Dr. Price, which some people write off because it's all anecdotal, but he really did document some very interesting things in a period of time that we can't recreate those studies now because a lot of these communities are no longer eating their traditional diet or may not even exist anymore, right? But in some of those communities, when you'd have tribes, for example, where one tribe lived more in the mountains and one was in the coast, even if they were warring tribes, they would set up drop points for sharing food, where the coastal tribes would bring fish and shellfish up to a certain area to trade with that tribe. And the mountain people would bring other foods down. And it's like they knew that their population needed to have seafood at least every approximately 3 months for them to maintain fertility. Again, an interesting historical anecdote, but when you look at the roles of iodine in maintaining ovulatory function, for example, it's huge. And we're in a situation now in the US where about half of women actually have insufficient iodine status. Everyone thinks we're fine because we iodize our salt. We're not fine. And when your iodine status is suboptimal, you see significant delays in conception, likely related to issues with thyroid function, but it could be other factors as well. So seafood key, I'm just like highlighting one micronutrient in there and its role. Minimally processed and full fat dairy products. Not all populations consume dairy, but in those that do, it does really serve as a very valuable source of many micronutrients. Everyone thinks calcium and vitamin D, for example, but it also provides riboflavin and B12 and vitamin A in its retinol form. It's actually the major source of preformed vitamin A in the US diet. And if you deprive people of vitamin A, fertility goes down the tubes. Testosterone production goes down, ovulation ceases. In animal studies, they can they can completely halt sperm production. They can also halt ovulation by depriving animals of iodine. And in like the farm world, where you want to keep, dairy cows, for example, getting pregnant and having babies so they continue lactating, you actually give them iodine supplementation so they maintain their fertility, and you give them vitamin A supplementation as well so they maintain their fertility. Fermented foods, also valuable for maintaining the microbiome. Healthy gut determines whether or not we're going to be absorbing and utilizing nutrients well. And that really is the original probiotic before we had all these supplements. And of course, there's a place for vegetables and fruit as well for their many antioxidants, their fiber, and really most communities worldwide, you do see eating an omnivorous diet to some degree. Of course, this varies based on, their latitude and what's available. In the far north, you have significantly less plant foods, and equatorial populations have a lot more. But I do believe they also have a place.
Sean, what does this remind you of, this discussion?
We've had a lot of discussions. You have to be more specific.
So we've been talking about the optimal diet for mental health.
You've asked that question almost every professional that's come in here that is in the field of health and diet. You asked the question, is there an optimal human diet?
And then I did my own research and I created a Substack article around it. And you and I had a conversation on the optimal mental health diet. And it's just so much about what she's speaking about. Lily, I do have a question about protein intake. And that seems to be...
I have a question that might come from that also. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's where there's more contradictory advice, right? About how much protein we should be eating daily. And I know the recommended daily allowance just seems like frightening low, like really low. What do you recommend as far as the daily allowance of protein?
So I'm in agreement with you that the RDA is set too low. And there's actually a number of protein researchers who have been writing about precisely that in recent years, that the basis of our evidence used to set the RDA is incomplete. And they really chose a level that's at bare minimum to prevent overt protein deficiency and death as a result, but not at a level that's helpful for optimal health. So my opinion is that, the RDA is set at a grams per kilogram ratio, so 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if we're going to use an example woman who is about 150 pounds, that equates to 55 grams of protein per day. I mean, I like to put the numbers to it because sometimes people don't realize what we're up against here, but it's it's really low. This is like a bare minimum, about 10% or so percent of calories coming from protein. My opinion, and this is all based on some of these, game-changing protein researchers, is that we should have a bare minimum of no less than 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. It's arguable that optimal is more like 1.5 to 2.2 grams per kilogram. So for that woman who weighs 150 pounds, instead of eating 55 grams of protein, bare minimum would be 80 grams of protein. Optimal may very well be in the range of like 100 to 150 grams of protein a day.
And that's hard. Like if you're just eating a normal diet of like maybe eggs in the morning, a normal lunch, and then
Well, what would be a normal lunch?
Let's say like a normal lunch for most people might be like a salad with grilled chicken or like a protein on there, or a sandwich. But then at dinner time, it might be a starch, a vegetable, and a protein. So even if those are whole foods, you add those together, it's difficult to get that many grams of protein. And I think those who are in the space and are aware of some of those numbers, they might supplement in the morning with like making a smoothie. So like my question is, are those like whey isolate proteins or like pea proteins, are those sufficient enough to give you the nutrients that you need to offset what you're not consuming as whole food?
I mean, it would certainly fill the gap for just protein requirements if you're just looking at like grams of protein and trying to get it in. My concern when people are too reliant on protein powders, again, I see no problem with them being used as an adjunct to otherwise the majority of their protein is coming in from whole foods. But my concern when it's taking the place of whole foods is they're protein isolate. So they're not necessarily going to be maintaining the micronutrient makeup that was in the original food. You're also not getting the fat that was in the original food. So you just want to make sure that you're also getting some of those other things on the side. Again, I mean, I sometimes use protein powders too, like a beef protein isolate, or I'm a big fan of. We're not getting the level of collagen in our diet than we ancestrally used to, right? You know this if any of you have done like an animal share, like a pig or a cow share, and you get all the parts of the animal with it. It's like, holy cow, the majority of this meat is not tender steak and pork chops. Like the majority of it is meat that is connected to bones with a significant amount of connective tissue, right? So if you're really eating ancestrally, we were getting a lot more collagen than we used to. But I do like to emphasize or encourage people to get as much protein as they can from the whole food. So they're also getting that full micronutrient component and the fat that is designed to be there with the food, with the protein. We do need some of those micronutrients to help with utilization of that protein. So I'm neither, anti or pro. I'm in between. I think it can be a useful supplement.
Understood. Focusing on the area of trying to conceive. I made a list of some of the things that my wife and I tried that friends had told us. And there is some components within those that may be beneficial. I just wanted to pick your brain on a few. Can I throw them out to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to what a lot of our maybe fertility doctors said is, the woman at this stage, when you're trying to conceive, you want to have a nice warm uterus, pillowy, sticky. So all those things were kind of repeated to us. But something like pineapple core, which is high in bromelain, that was something that stuck with me. Is there anything in pineapple core, consuming it, eating it, putting into a smoothie, or even eating it raw, that actually could be beneficial to help conceive?
That's a good question. I have not seen research on that specifically.
Well,
I can think through it maybe from the perspective of, bromelain being like a proteolytic enzyme, and you're trying to break up, clean up the dead old cells and get rid of them. I could maybe see it through that angle. Do I know of any research that specifically used that as an intervention for fertility? Not off the top of my head. So that's an interesting one.
I've done some reading on it and I can't find anything. So I was curious. Here's another one. Royal jelly.
Yeah.
Consuming royal jelly for the female to help with fertility.
I have heard this one as well. It is uniquely high in certain B vitamins. So thinking of it through that perspective as like sort of a supplemental source of B vitamins, I could see it potentially being helpful. We didn't feel the evidence was strong enough to make the cut to, put it into writing and Real Food for Fertility, but I certainly don't think it could cause any harm.
It was also expensive because it comes from the
expensive
queen bee.
Yeah, and I kind of feel bad for the bees a little bit. I mean, that's like the queen bee's food. So there's all sorts of like, ethical conversations in the bee world about like taking away queen bee's source of food. I don't know. That's beyond.
I'm with you there. We got enough bee problems also. This is